So hope you're awake and not listening to the pitter-patter of the rain on your roof. Get your cup of coffee and a cup of hot chocolate, and we're going to study about David and Jonathan this morning. We're doing our lesson out of 1 Samuel chapter 20. If you have your Bible with you, if you'll turn to that, to 1 Samuel chapter 20. First, as we've done for the last couple of weeks, first thing I'd like to ask, we've got a couple in our church and good friends of ours, David and Donna Allen. They've had a real hard summer with health issues, and if everybody will remember to pray for them. Miss them sitting here in Sunday school, because anytime they can come, they always come here and really like to add a lot to the class, so I wish you would pray for them. We've had several in the church this summer that have had a really hard time and a struggle with illness that we need to always lift each other up with prayers. Okay, so if you go back last week and the last couple of weeks, remember we're talking about David, or King David, but he's not actually the king of Israel right now because Saul is still the king in power. But David, when he was a young man, if we remember, he was anointed as king at age 15 while Saul was still in power. Remember, at age 19, he defeated Goliath when he went out to see his brothers and to take them some food while they were in the army. And then he ended up defeating Goliath, and he gained a whole lot of notoriety in the community because of the women were singing that Saul had slain his thousands and David tens of thousands. And we remember from that King Saul became really jealous of David. David would play for Saul. Saul had fits of rage, and he would have David come in and play a musical instrument for him to calm him down. But it got where Saul was so jealous that he couldn't contain his anger from him, and he threw his javelin. He tried to pin David to the wall. But we remember that with the Lord's help, that David was able to get away from him. And you know that King Saul would have been very trained with his spear. So without the Lord's help, David probably wouldn't have been able to get away from him once he did that. So last week we recall that Jonathan, the king's son, who was a good friend with David, went and talked to the king and talked him down and asked him, why are you trying to hurt David? He's only helped you. He's only defeated this giant. He's won many battles. The Philistines were just a constant thorn in their flesh and kept battling David. And Saul would send David out into the worst battles. He would send him trying to get him killed in battle so he wouldn't have to have the death on his hand. We remember we talked about he even gave him his daughter Michal for a bride. And he sent David out. David was poor and didn't have any dowry to give, so he sent David out to kill 100 Philistines, and David killed double that when he came back. And Saul was intended that he would get killed trying to get this. But we also know that Michal did love David, and that when Saul sent his men to the house to get David, that Michal had helped him to get out the window and to get away from him. And wanted to go back and recap just a little bit between when we left out last week and what we're going to study this week. Okay, so we're going to look at chapter 19 and verses 12. It says, Michal let David down through a window and he fled and escaped. So that's where we were at last week when we left. Then Michal took an idol and laid it on the bed, covering it with a garment, and put some goat's hair on the head. When Saul sent his men to capture David and Michal, David, Michal said, he is ill. So she told them when the men came in to get him, she said, you know, he's really sick, he's in the bed. So then Saul told the men, bring him to me in his bed so that I may kill him. So Saul wants them to pick him up out of the house in his bed. He's thinking he's really ill and he's in the bed and he wants to kill him while he's ill. So he tells them to pick him up and bring him. So they found out that it was just an idol in the bed, that David wasn't in the bed and he had escaped. And Saul felt betrayed by his own daughter Michal because she was the one that had helped him escape. And he's asking, you know, why did you go against me and do this against me? And we know when Michal fled, it said he made his escape to Samuel at Ramah. So we remember that Samuel is the prophet at the time. Samuel is the one that anointed Saul as king. And Samuel, I was reading back last night, Samuel really loved Saul. When he anointed him as king, you know, he was the prophet at the time. He stood beside Saul. He tried to give him good advice through the Lord of things to do. And when the Lord told Samuel that Saul no longer was king, Samuel was really hurt by this. He mourned because of it. You know, he had tried his best to lead Saul down the right path, but Saul just continued. As he grew in strength, Saul quit looking to the Lord for things and started looking to himself for it, and Samuel was really grieved. And then he anointed David as king as God had instructed him to do. So we see that David goes back to him, that he has some trust in Samuel, so he goes to him when he's fleeing for his life. So David was with Samuel in Ramah, which was his hometown. Saul sent his men he found out that he was with Samuel, because the king's going to have access to everything, and people are going to tell him. And I'm sure some people that thought maybe David was vying for that Saul had his spies came back. So he sent some men out to get David, and we read here that it says, and the Spirit of God came upon Saul's men, and they prophesied. And I was reading in another book, and it said that the Spirit of the Lord, where they were talking about they prophesied, and I like this, it said the Spirit of the Lord overwhelmed these men. And, sometimes in church we have our structure, we have our beginning, we have our songs, we take up our offering, and we do things. But sometimes the Lord comes in and He overwhelms those things. He overwhelms the services and He changes things. Those are the best services we can have because the Lord is in control. And we see even back in this day that it says the men came and prophesied. So the Lord overwhelmed them to where they couldn't finish even what the king had told them to do. And, they would have tried to do that because I'm sure they would have been punished for not doing it. It says he sent more men, and they prophesied too. Saul sent men a third time, and they also prophesied. Remember, I'm reading back in chapter 19. In verse 22, it says, finally, he himself left for Ramah and went to the great cistern at Seku, and he asked, where are Samuel and David? And they told him that he was at Ramah. But the Spirit of God came upon even him, and he walked along prophesying until he came to Naioth. He stripped off his robes and also prophesied in Samuel's presence. He lay that way all the day and night. This is why the people say, is Saul also among the prophets? So we see even the king, who, we've studied the last few weeks, he's burning with jealousy and hatred for David right now. He wants him dead. He sent 3 sets of men. He's tried to kill him, but he goes and in the presence of God, he doesn't have any strength to overcome the Spirit of the Lord that came over him. It says he took off his robes. any armor that he would have had on, the weapons that he would have had to kill David, his kingly attire and stuff, he took that aside because of the Lord overwhelmed him with his spirit. So we see that even the king was not able to forego that, even in all the thoughts that he had that he was going to depend on himself and that he would be able to rule the kingdom without the Lord's help, that he was the king. So that brings us to where we're going to start today at 1 Samuel chapter 20 verses 1 through 13. Our golden text for the day says, "A man that hath friends must show himself friendly, and there is a friend that sticketh closer than a brother." And that comes from Proverbs 18:24. The lesson aimed to show the value of friendship and that Jesus is the best friend that we can ever have. Okay. So in the title of this is David and Jonathan. Of course, we're looking at their friendship and how strong it was. And remember, the last week we talked about Jonathan. Jonathan was in line to be king after Saul was gone. So it was a big thing on Jonathan's part to love David and to realize that David was going to take this kingship away from him, that he had to lay this down. And Jonathan didn't have hard feelings. He didn't have hatred. He didn't have any animosity toward David, even though he knew that, this revered spot he was going to lose to David. And I was reading in the lesson, it was saying, that Jonathan, knew that he would be rewarded in the future for these things. There's a lot of things on earth that we think are the most important things, but the rewards in heaven that wait are far above anything that we can get here. And sometimes we, being the microwave society, we're not willing to wait for those rewards. We want them right here and now. And as we know, here and now is very fleeting, and that the things of heaven are eternal. So we need to look to those things and look over our idea of the way things should be, because God knows the big picture of things, and we should wait for His will. Okay. So starting in 1 Samuel chapter 20, verse 1, it says, "And David fled from Naioth and Ramah, and came and said before Jonathan, What have I done? What is mine iniquity? And what is my sin before thy father, that he seeketh my life?" So, David's kind of puzzled at the point, because he thinks that he's done good things for Saul. He hasn't, even though he was anointed king several years before, he has never made a move to take over the kingdom. He has really made moves to make the kingdom stronger under Saul's leadership. So, he doesn't know what he's done. He's gone before the king. He's been a servant to the king. He's played music. He's kind of calmed him. So he doesn't know, he's asking Jonathan, because he knows Jonathan's in the confidence of the king being his son. What did I do? It refers us back to Samuel chapter 15, verses 26 through 29 that I wanted to read to you. Forgot to bring my glasses, and this book is small. This is talking about Samuel and Saul. He was speaking with Saul. "But Samuel said to him, I will not go back with you. You have rejected the word of the Lord, and the Lord has rejected you as king over Israel." And as Samuel turned to leave, Saul called hold of the hem of his robe, and it tore. Samuel said to him, "The Lord has torn the kingdom of Israel from you today, and has given it to one of your neighbors, to one better than you. He is the glory of Israel, does not lie or change his mind, for he is not a man that he could change his mind." So, the writer of this is thinking, and Saul knows that Samuel said the kingdom has been taken from you. So he has this harsh, bitter heart now because the Lord has rejected him as king. So this is what he's living with every day, and this is what is probably festering the hatred that he knows that he can't hold on to this power, that it was taken away from him, and he's taken it out on David. And David is unsure why this is happening. And this is Jonathan speaking back to David in verse 2 of chapter 20. And he said unto him, God forbid, thou shalt not die. Behold, my father will do nothing, either great or small, but that he will show it to me. And why should my father hide this thing from me? It is not so. So Jonathan's saying, my dad doesn't hate you, and if he did, we're close, he confides in me, and he would tell you these things. And, he's saying he's never mentioned or he's never said anything about hating you to me. In verse 3, and David swore moreover and said, Thy father certainly knoweth that I have found grace in thy eyes. And he said, Let not Jonathan know this, lest he be grieved. But truly as the Lord liveth, and as thy soul liveth, there is but a step between me and death. So, David explains to him, he is after me. He's tried to kill me. He's doing this. But he knows that me and you are close. So that's why he's not indulging any of this stuff to you, because he thinks you may tell me. And I'm sure he's known Michael in the past helped David, so I think he's probably aware that we're friends. And he said, and David is saying, I'm a step away from death. He's had this, and he knows that the king has every resource at his hands to put people hunting him. Verse 4, Then said Jonathan unto David, Whatsoever thy soul desireth, I will even do it for thee. So, with their friendship, he's willing to do what it takes to find out, to try to protect his friend, even if it's foregoing the relationship between he and his father. And sometimes, hopefully, it's not the majority of the time, or doesn't even happen a lot of times, but sometimes we can get bad counsel from people who are in authority over us, or who are a family member or a respected person to us, and they may have a hidden agenda towards something, or they may have things that have happened in their past, and they're giving us bad counsel that, even though it's somebody, like as in Jonathan's sake, a parent, that you would expect that you would, what they tell you, you would want to do and want to obey, for reasons, give you bad counsel. Verse 5 says, And David said unto Jonathan, Behold, tomorrow is the new moon, and I should not fail to sit with the king at meat. But let me go, that I may hide myself in the field until the third day at Eden. So Saul there was a family festival that they would meet at, and the whole family would sit around the table and eat, and they would have this festival. And it says it would last maybe sometimes from 2 to 3 days that they would do this. And David is also Saul's son-in-law, so he was expected to be at that table and to eat with them. And he was wanting Jonathan to help him. He's wanting to be absent from that meal, but Saul is going to recognize that and wonder where he is. So he's saying, I want to be able to be absent, till the third evening. Verse 6, If thy father at all miss me, then say, David earnestly asked leave of me, that he might run to Bethlehem, his city, for there is a yearly sacrifice there for all the family. So Jonathan was to make excuses for David not being there, and said, he needs to go back to his hometown. He needs to miss this festival that we're having as a family, but to go back to his hometown because there's a festival there instead. Verse 7, If he says thus, It is well, thy servant shall have peace. But if he be very wroth, then be sure that evil is determined by him. So they were going to kind of judge Saul's, how he reacted to that, as to whether, if it's like, well, sure, he's been with our family, he needs to go back to his home, then he would know that Saul had a kind spirit toward him. But if Saul got really mad, where is he? Why isn't he here? David's going to recognize that he still has these harsh feelings toward him, and he doesn't want him there necessarily because he's a family member and his son-in-law and he loves him, but he wants to have his hands on him, and he wants to be able to catch him or have him near anytime he needs to, chooses to do harm to him. In verse 8, therefore thou shalt deal kindly with thy servant, for thou hast brought thy servant into a covenant of the Lord with thee. Notwithstanding, if there be in me iniquity, slay me thyself, for why shouldest thou bring me to my father? So apparently, we've said David and Jonathan are very close friends, as we've said. It says, for thou hast brought thy servant into a covenant of the Lord with me. So apparently, with their both being in the sight of the Lord and being men of the Lord, they've come into a friendship covenant together through the Lord. And David says, if there be iniquity, slay me yourself. So David's saying, Jonathan, if I've done something, if there's something, and sometimes we do stuff and we don't even realize we've done it. We don't intentionally do harm sometimes, but sometimes we do that, and it takes somebody else that we love and we trust to tell us, maybe you didn't have bad intentions when you did this, but you said something or you made an action. And some people, we might not have even done anything, but they took it in a way that it hurt them. And your friend might know that, and it may be that, you need to make an apology or go tell the person, I didn't intend to do this. So he's talking to his friend whom he trusts and saying, if I've done something worthy of my life, you kill me, at this point. He says, for why shouldst thou bring me to my father? So he's, saying that I trust you to tell me what I've done. Verse 9, and Jonathan said, far be it from thee, for if I knew certainly that evil were determined by my father to come upon thee, would I not tell it to thee? So he's telling David, if I thought my father was after you, I would tell you. I love you, and even though I generally take counsel and I do what my father says, if he was coming upon you with evil that wasn't warranted, I would tell you that. Verse 10, it says, then said David to Jonathan, who shall tell me, or what, if thy father answer thee roughly? So he's trying to figure out the plan of if when they're at the dinner table, if the father really wants him, and that Jonathan finally realizes that he's after him. Verse 11 said, and Jonathan said unto David, come and let us go into the field. And they both of them went out into the field. Verse 13, 12. And Jonathan said unto David, O Lord God of Israel, when I have sounded my father tomorrow at any time or the third day, and behold, if there be good toward David, and if I sin not unto thee, and show it thee, the Lord do so much more to Jonathan. But if it please my father to do thee evil, then I will show it thee, and send thee thy way, that thou may goest in peace, and the Lord be with thee, as he has my father. So as we see, Jonathan's going to do what they ask, and Jonathan's going to go in front of his father, and he's going to see if Saul has evil toward him. So his friendship, the lesson looks at not so much at David this week, but at Jonathan for the friendship that he feels toward David, and that, you know, we should have the true friendship, and that moreover, the friendship with the Lord is greater than all these friendships, that there's, you know, the trust issue that we don't have to have. You know, the Lord is always going to be on our side no matter what, even though sometimes our truest friends or people we think have other motives. And instead of today, the questions that we usually go through, I know last week, and we may look at a couple of them, that Buford put them online so you could look at them and that you could think about it and maybe go back over the lesson to see if you know the answers to the questions that the lesson has. But there are points to ponder in here that I wanted to read over. It says, the truest friendship requires worth in both persons. And to me, that's saying that both people have to be interested in having this friendship. They both have to have the same motives in the friendship, that it takes worth in both persons. So you can't require a friendship but the other person not, and that be a true friendship. And the second, friendship loves to make sacrifices for friends. So you have to be willing, if the friend needs something, that you don't expect a return back, that it's not always, and this wouldn't be for me because I can't cook. I cooked you a chocolate pie, so you've got to cook me something, or I went to the store for you, so now I won't ever go to the store for you again because you haven't gone back for me. So
you do me like that all the time.
Number 3, there is great danger in false friends who tempt to evil, who lead astray, who hinder from doing right. Sometimes we have friends who have ideas that, you know, they want you to do things that you know is not right, but maybe they're a person that enjoys doing dangerous things or things that you really shouldn't do, that, oh, everybody's doing it, we're going to just, you will have fun tonight, let's try that. So, you know, and sometimes those people will do things just to get you in trouble. That you know, they're not really your friend, but that, you know, they're doing these things that they know. Say if you're a child or whatever and you're at your home and your parent has told you not to take the car out, you know, you're to stay home, it's a rainy night like it is, and your friend's like, no, you know, they're gone for the night, they won't be back, we know that, we'll take the car out and we'll be back before they get home. So, you know, those people really aren't looking up for your welfare as your friend. They're looking for the immediate free ride that they're going to get. Yes, not necessarily anything to do with you, but yes, and it's your parents' car, not theirs, that might be wrecked. We should be very careful in the choice of friends. You know, our choice of friends do say a whole lot about us. I always told my daughter to always pick a friend that she felt that was, you know, better on a higher level. It's kind of what I've done. You know, pick a friend, a more spiritual friend than you, and that gives you some, you know, you can strive. You know, they're always there to help you cheer on, but it gives you the, you know, the capacity to strive for higher, the things you see in them that you want to strive to be more, to, you know, to do more like them. It is good to have a friend, but better to be a friend. And we had talked about, you know, that's more of the, not I do for you, you do for me, I do for you, that you're willing to do whatever they need, regardless of you know, what you think or what you personally might do. And the last is one who causes you to lower your principles or moral standards is not a true friend. And, you know, as we had talked before, some of the things that you might get involved in that you wouldn't necessarily have chosen. You have a friend that has asked you to do these things. And I guess that's why my thought is, if you pick a friend who is of higher moral standards than you are, then this is not likely to happen. You know, they're going to lead you to do things, but it's not going to be things that are going to lower your principles. It's going to be things that will lift you higher with your standards. So that's the lesson for today. Did you all have anything you wanted to add to the class that about David or Jonathan? Are there any thoughts that you have? Like I say, the questions will be on Facebook if you want to look at them. If you ever have any questions about lessons or about anything, glad to answer them. Buford's usually in the office on Facebook, so he would have access at the time to do this. And we hope to see you next Sunday. And it will be on 1 Samuel chapter 26. We're going to do verses 5 through 12 and then 21 through 25 in the lesson. But if you want to read in between in 1 Samuel chapters 20 through 26, it looks like during the week, that'll help you to be caught up with our lesson. And the name of the lesson next week is David Spares Saul's Life. Thank you, and we'll see you next week.